I welcome you today to the Berkeley Center and to the talk by Bassam Tibi following a couple of his publications over the past year. Let me just say a word about the Berkeley Center and direct your attention that we have some studies on the wall near the lunch and some in the back of the room there that you can take with you when you go, including our annual report and some reports from our recent symposia. The Berkeley Center was created 4 years ago in the spring of 2006 in the office of our president, President John J. DeGioia, to build on Georgetown's academic strengths here in the Washington, D.C. area, our international networks, our Jesuit identity, with the goal of advancing scholarship, research, and teaching on the interdisciplinary study of religion. And not just research that's divorced from the classroom, but also teaching with undergraduate and graduate students, as well as engaging in national and international policy debates. And today, our speaker fits that model very well. Our distinguished speaker, Bassam Tibi, has a lengthy academic career. He started as a student in the Frankfurt School of International Theory with Theodor Adorno, with Jürgen Habermas, with Max Horkheimer. He has been a guest lecturer or professor at 30 universities on 5 continents. He's held visiting professorships at 18 of them, including at some of the most prestigious schools in the United States, such as Harvard, Cornell, Yale, and others. Most recently, he was professor of international relations at the University of Göttingen and non-resident A.D. White professor of international relations at Cornell. And this summer, he's back for a second stint as a senior fellow at the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the Holocaust Museum here in Washington, D.C. He is the author of 27 books in 16 languages, most notably The Challenge of Fundamentalism, Islam Between Culture and Politics, Arab Nationalism Between Islam and the State, and most recently, Islam's Predicament with Modernity, Religious Reform and Cultural Change. I met Professor Tibi over the past 2 years as he was a contributor to my edited volume, Debating the War of Ideas, in which he had a parallel presentation about the challenges of modernity in contemporary Islam. And with that, would you please help me welcome Professor Bassam Tibi.
Thank you, Eric, for this warm welcome. As Eric stated, we worked together in completing the edited book, the book he edited on the War of Ideas, released this year. And we met first face-to-face in person last month, and we found so many areas of commonalities, and it is very exciting to know you and to work with you, and thank you for inviting me to the Berkeley Center. Berkeley is, I associate with Berkeley one of the 18 visiting professorships I had. I was 1994 visiting professor at UC Berkeley, and it's nice to be in Berkeley, DC. Yeah. My training was in philosophy, and then I moved under U.S. impact to international relations, and I had the chair for international relations for 37 years at the University of Göttingen, and I'm, since last year, retired. But with a hindsight to my academic career, say what was your basic accomplishment? My basic accomplishment was to establish a new discipline. I call it Islamology. Islamology is not Islamic studies. Islamic studies in the United States are study of the religion of Islam, study of its culture. Anthropologists study the culture of Islam. Others study the literature, the language. They are in the United States until today. Less than 5 American scholars who are professional political scientists or sociologists who work on Islam. Yeah? So that means there's a great interest in the study of Islam, a long-standing one that has been heightened by 9/11, but still a social scientific approach to the study of Islam is lacking. And I have been doing that in the past 40 years. Yeah? to study Islam from a social scientific perspective, not the religion of Islam itself. I'm a Muslim myself, and I'm proud that my family claims, whether this is true or not, but because many people claim that. But there's a genealogy in the living room in the house of my parents in Damascus. I'm a born Syrian, which shows that my family has a lineage up to the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, so the Islamic roots are very deep, whether real or perceived. I'm a scholar. I'm critical of everything. Yeah, and say if everybody who claims to be Sayyid, I'm Sayyid or Ashraf, be descendant of the Prophet must have, well, he had 13 wives, but that would have not been enough to produce so much people. Yeah. Okay, this is this aside. I mean, I start with an anecdote, the American way. Yeah, my luck. It's a real anecdote. It happened. Yeah. Samuel Huntington, with whom I was until he passed away, we were in disagreement. But disagreement doesn't mean lack of respect, mutual respect. And if you look at my book here, I have only 20 flyers. Probably you can. This is the second. This is a book completed during my last tenure at Harvard was for 2 years. 1998 to 2000, and I completed that book at Harvard. And in the preface or in the acknowledgement, I mentioned Huntington, and at that time it was highly questioned, disputed in the United States due to his clash of civilization. And I mentioned him in the acknowledgement, saying some people will be surprised that I'm mentioning him, even though I'm critical of his rhetoric of clash of civilization. And I do that in integrity because he was the one who brought me to Harvard. And the story, I cut it short to make, let me talk about the time. It is now 12:15. How long am I supposed, how much time you allow me to talk?
Say 25, 30.
Okay, let's say until a quarter to 1, yeah? Okay, okay. So, it was Huntington who invited me in 1982 to come to Harvard and join Harvard faculty at the Center for International Affairs. And after a few weeks of my Harvard tenure, 82, so 30 years ago, he discovered that I'm working on a book on Islam. And he invited me to his office, and he said, I invited you on the basis of your research. I published a very successful book on nationalism, still read, Arab nationalism between Islam and the nation state. And I published a book about the intervention of military into politics and on the theory of institutionalization in development. They said, I invited you on the basis of this research, but I heard you are working now on Islam, and well, you are invited to stay with us. I had a contract for 1 year, but after that year, you go to the divinity school if you want to stay at Harvard, yeah? Because we do not deal with religion. Religion has nothing to do with politics, yeah? Religion is a faith. That was Samuel Huntington who wrote the book Clash of Civilization, 82, yeah? And I explained to him, religion is coming back to politics, and this is not well known, but I'm not working on religion as a theologian. I'm not a theologian. I'm a social scientist and philosopher, and I deal with religion and world politics. So my accomplishment, the discipline of Islamology, to cut the story short, the discipline of Islamology deals with Islam's and politics, in particular world politics. And I'm talking about Islam as a social reality, not about Islam as a faith. It's not the same. More about this in the course of my presentation. Yeah? There are two references which I would recommend to you if you want to pursue. I mean, the fact that you are here, that means you are interested in the subject matter. But if you want to pursue this, I would recommend to you two readings. One of them is Eric Patterson's book, War of Ideas, and I am proud to be one of the contributors to the book. So the book is very important and very timely. Even though it touches on a very disputed matter. But if a book does not touch on a disputed matter, then it is boring. And Eric's book is not boring. It's most exciting. Yeah? And the second reference is to my book. This is my life work, Islam's Predicament with Modernity. I worked, actually, this book is a summary of my scholarly journey into Islam for 40 years. Yeah? It was published last year with Routledge in New York. And in particular, you don't have to read the whole book, but chapter 5 about how cultural tensions develop to political tensions, and then a political conflict emerges. So this is the inquiry in which I'm leading you into. And in order to avoid misunderstanding, there is a pollution. Since 9/11, it existed before, but since 9/11, there is a pollution in politics, and this is spilling over to academia. So it's becoming very difficult to touch on disputed issues, on controversial issues. Instead of refuting you, people call you names and accuse you with all kind of things. One of these stones hurled during the debate is Orientalism or Islamophobia. So I cannot be Orientalist because I'm a Middle Easterner. If you come closer, you see I'm not white. I'm an Asian. I'm Asian from Damascus. My faith is Islam. So I cannot be white Orientalist, number one. And I cannot be Islamophobic because Islam is not only my faith, it's my identity and the identity of my family, of which I'm very proud. So both do not apply. Then people try to find other labels. So to avoid misunderstanding in the existing pollution, and I hope it's not here in this room. First of all, I do not talk about clash of civilization, and I do not like the idea. Samuel Huntington touches on some real points, but his analysis is wrong, and his conclusions as well. And we had many hours of debate at Harvard during lunch and dinner in Harvard Faculty Club, even at his home. And the fact that he does not quote me one single time in his book is an indication of disagreement, because he didn't want to put it in writing. So we are disagreement about clash of civilization, and I did something which he didn't like, but he respected it. I wrote with the former president of Germany, Roman Herzog was between 95 and 2000 was the president of Germany, president of the Federal Republic of Germany, and he wanted to write something against Huntington, and I joined him, and we published a book in English. We wrote the book, even though we are both Germans. I mean, I'm German by citizenship. My mother tongue is Arabic, and German is my third foreign language. But we wrote a book in English, Preventing the Clash of Civilizations, and it's a book against Huntington. We gave him the floor to write the final chapter to refute us, but he declined. Yeah, so do not be mistaken. I'm not talking about clash of civilization when I talk about cultural tensions and how cultural tensions develop to conflict. Number two, I'm not talking about cultural wars. I do not believe there's something like that. So war of ideas is another cultural war. It's a political war. Yeah, one of the accusations is the accusation of culturalism. Culturalism means you explain everything by culture. You say, why there are conflict between the world of Islam and the West, you say, this is a cultural war, and people who state that, which is wrong, this is culturalism. That means you explain everything by culture. I believe that conflicts are multifaceted. Conflict have political dimension, economic dimension, social dimension, cultural dimension, and you go on. So conflicts are multifaceted. So you can refer to culture, and I believe culture is very important, but with a reference to culture alone, you cannot explain properly what is going on. And the last thing, I mean, I can go on with the list, but then it will be boring. But I have to protect myself. I'm not essentializing Islam, yeah? Because this is the most hurting accusation that I've been exposed to. To essentialize is to look at something as static. Say, like, Islam is like this, it is static, it does not change, and Muslim people believe in a static system which doesn't change, and that's why Islam is subjected to essentialism, and this is a Western way of thinking. The subtitle that my most recent major book bears, Islam's Predicament with Modernity, the subtitle is Cultural Change and Religious Reform. And the subtitle indicates that I look to cultural change in Islam, which means Islam is changing, is ever changing. Islam of today is not Islam of yesterday. And Islam of yesterday is not Islam of the 18th century of the medieval times. And Islam varies from one place to another. I lived in 20 different Islamic countries, not only in the Arab world. I lived also in Indonesia. I lived in Senegal. And these are non-Arab countries. And I know diversity within Islam. And so essentialism does not apply. And the accusation of essentialism is a polemic which does not, which hurts, but it does not meet the point. Yeah? So my talk is about cultural tensions and how these tensions develop to a conflict. And this one dimension of this is the war of ideas. And this is the subject matter of Eric. And he invited me to talk to you with this focus. I have 3 parts of my presentation. I'm sorry to have taken 10 minutes for the introduction, but then I have to be careful with the rest because I'm going to keep the time. First, the framework, and second, the analysis, and third, the policy implications. Yeah? I'm going to expose you to 3 ideas, and these 3 ideas create my framework of thinking and my framework of work, my framework of involvement in studying the subject matter. First, religion is in substance a faith. Islam is like Christianity or Judaism, it is a faith, but it is also a cultural system because Muslim people, like other people, Christians or Jews, but this is stronger in Islam maybe than in other religion. Islam is not only a faith, it is also a way of life. So Islam has its own way of life, but it's not the same. The Islamic way of life in Senegal, I lived among Senegalese, and it was different than the way of life that I experienced in the Arab world. And every time I said to my Senegalese friends, "Ce n'est pas islamique" in French, this is not Islamic, the way I know Islam, but the response was, "Mais c'est africain." This is African, c'est notre Islam. This is our Islam, and it was different. You see, so the different way of life, Islam is a way of life, but it differs from one space to another. And also Islam is a cult. Yeah? Even the cult differs from one to another. Even though the time is running, I have to present some examples to make the issue less abstract, more concrete. Once I was in Kairouan. Kairouan is there's a mosque there. It's one of the major mosques in the world of Islam. After Medina, Mecca, and Cairo, the Kairouan mosque is very authoritative in the city of Kairouan in Tunisia. And the people, my host, went to the mosque and to show me the mosque. They said, "Since we are in a mosque, we should pray." And they asked me to join them to pray. And we started praying, and I was praying. You know, Muslims pray in standing, and I made the hand like this. And one of my hosts took my hand and put that way, make like this. Said, "Why?" He said, "You have forgotten to pray. You have lived long in Germany, and we Muslims, we pray like this." And I told them, I am not Maliki Muslims. I'm Sunni Muslim, but I'm not Maliki Muslims. I am Hanafi Muslims. And I grew up in Damascus. In Damascus, we pray like this. And you see, even the cult differs. Yeah. So religion is a faith, cultural system, and it is also a cult. But religion is not a political ideology, and this also applies to Islam. Islam has 5 pillars. Yeah, and this is there's a consent about this throughout the world of Islam. The pillars are to pray, to fast in Ramadan. To do the Hajj, to pay tax for the poor, and to fast in Ramadan. But there is no mentioning of politics. There is no mentioning of the state. Religion becomes a part of politics when you politicize it. Yeah? And Islam has been politicized many times in history, but the politicization of Islam to Islamism is a novelty that did not exist in history. Islamism emerged with the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, 1928. Many people say political Islam and Islamism is just a response to the injustice of the State of Israel, to the injustice of Zionism. This is wrong. in the world of Islam, people didn't know what the Zionism is all about, and there existed no Israel at the time. So since there existed no Israel, 1928, that's 20 years ahead. So the emergence of political Islam has nothing to do with Israel or with the Middle East conflict or with the Zionism. The religion Islam has been politicized to a political ideology, and this is the first idea. The second idea, Islam and politics is based on politicization. This is not the Islamic faith, this is not the Islamic culture. The second idea is culture by itself is never a source of conflict. And that's why I believe there are no cultural wars. But there are, in the United States of America, the country is secular, even though the majority of Americans are Christians, but there are others as well. But America is by definition is a secular country, and the same applies to European countries. Some Turkish Islamists, including the present government in Turkey, accuses the European Union of being a Christian club. This is a polemics because the European Union is a community of sovereign states. They are not defined by Christianity. Yeah? So, in the civilization of Islam, there are cultures which are religion based, and they have value systems. And value systems, there are value systems that claim to be universalist. Islamic values claim to be universalist, and Western values, Western secular values, claim to be universalist as well. And also some Christian believe that Christian values are universalist. So you have different universalisms competing with one another, and this is the war of idea. Yeah, that the war of idea is that. It is not a military. People think war is with infantry and with the tanks and air force, but war of ideas is a war carried out by different value systems, and these value systems claim universality, and when they claim universality, they are in conflict with others. Like, for instance, the Jews, they do not engage in proselytization. They want to have a Jewish state, and so Jewish views are for the Jews themselves. But I learned when I was a little boy in Damascus, Islam is not only for us Muslims, Islam is for the entire humanity. I think Christians learn this as well. And also people who believe in universalist ideologies believe in the same as well. Yeah? So these value systems compete with one another, and they ignite tensions. And these tensions could develop to political conflict. And this is a war of ideas. I give you one example for the war of ideas, which I experienced myself. 1993, the United Nations organized a conference for human rights to renew the international consensus about human rights established 1949 in San Francisco, or 48 or 49? 48. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established. By then, the United Nations had only 66 members. And Saudi Arabia declined, and the Soviet Union declined as well. But today, the United Nations has 193 members, and therefore, this consent about universality of human rights has to be renewed. And I was there attending as a representative of the Arab Organization of Human Rights, non-governmental institution, and there was there a war of ideas between Minister of Foreign Affairs, because there were different concepts of human rights, Asian human rights, Asian values, Islamic values, Western values. So this is the second idea. And the third idea is, if you consider idea number one about religion and idea number two about value systems, and combine them together, then you understand the notion of religionized politics. The notion of religionized politics is a major notion in my recent book, Islam's Predicament with Modernity. Yeah? I talk about religionized politics, I talk about value conflicts, and I talk about the cultural underpinning of tensions, cultural tensions that develop to conflict. And this is the framework of my analysis. My analysis is about world politics. I was, in the first week of this month, I am at the moment based in Washington, but I left Washington at the beginning of this month to Budapest to participate in in a big international conference at the Central European University in Hungary. By the way, the university is established by an American who is a survivor, a Holocaust survivor, George Soros, who gave $1 billion to establish this university to disseminate democracy and human rights in Eastern Europe. And the title of the conference was The Return of Religion to Public Space. So this is a reality. I mean, we were there about 50 scholars from all over the world, but we were in agreement. Religion is back. Secularism is in challenge. And the religion claims a place in public space and how this place could be. And this is the beginning of a conflict. Yeah, it is first a conflict with secularism. It is a conflict with modernity, because modernity is by definition is secular. So there is a crisis of modernity. There's a crisis of secularism. But I had the impression there, because I've been working on the subject almost 40 years. Yeah. Most of the scholars are newcomers in this field, with some few exceptions, like my friend Shlomo Avneri. Shlomo Avneri is an Israeli. He's the most prominent political scientist in Israel. But because religion is now topical, and many people want to run in. Probably your center on religion, you get many applications, because this is a timely subject. And so where are the centers for the study of religion and world affairs? It is Berkeley Center. Then come and join. Yeah. But to be honest, I missed knowledge, because people they thought the return of religion is increased religiosity. It is a renaissance of religion. It is religious revival. And I kept saying, no, it's not. It is return of religion to public space. It's return to politics. The politics with a claim of a remaking of the world. The international system of today is based on the Westphalian synthesis. And those of you who know that, there was a 30 years war in Europe in the 17th century. And the war ended with the Peace of Westphalia, 1648. And the Peace of Westphalia is secular. And it takes religious foundations of the state away and look at the state as sovereign entity, and states recognize one another. And this is the international system still today based on Westphalian synthesis, and it is secular. And remaking of the world, and I now narrow down my views about Islam that I've been studying as Islamism in the past almost 40 years. Islam, please keep in mind, Islam is a faith, Islam is a cultural system, Islam is a cult. Islam is not a political ideology, but Islam has become a political ideology with the Society of the Muslim Brotherhood, established in Egypt, 28, and it has now linking. There are 4 internationalist Islamist organizations today. One of them Al-Qaeda, which is violent. One of them is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is not violent, but they share the same view, remaking the world along Islamic lines. Yeah? And this is Islamism. Islamism is not Islam. I say it again, Islamism is a political ideology with an agenda of a remaking of the world. Islam is not. Islamic universalism refers to the agenda of convincing people that Islam is the right religion, and to let people convert to Islam. That's it. That's it. Period. Yeah. But Islamist universalism aims at establishing an Islamic world order. This is an idea that does not exist in Islam. It does not exist in Islam. Yeah. The two major elements, I still have 6 minutes. The two major elements in the ideology of Islamism is a new concept of Sharia, a new concept of jihad. The term Sharia occurs only once in the Quran, and I can make a bet with any one of you that what I'm saying is correct, empirically correct. 90% of the Muslims, and I lived an important part of my life in the world of Islam, in the Arab world, in Southeast Asia and West Africa. 90% of the Muslims that I encountered, they didn't know what I'm telling you now. The term Sharia occurs only once in the Quran. And the verse is like this. This is in Surah 48, verse 18. وَثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكَ مِنْهَا شَرِيعَةٌ بِالْأَمْرِ فَاتَّبِعُوهَا. We have given you a sharia, so live after it. And sharia in the Quran means morality. Enjoin the good and forbid the evil. That's it, period. Sharia is not a legal system. Sharia in Islamic history developed to a legal system, but as a civil law, not as a state law. And Sharia as a state law is an outbirth of Islamism. It is recent. It does not exist in Islamic history, nor in the religion of Islam. And I call this Shariatized, it's difficult to, Sharia, and I make a verb of it, Sharia, Shariatize, and Shariatization of Islam. That was my paper that I presented 10 days ago to the conference in Budapest. Islamism, the return of Islam to public space, and the Shariatization of Islam. Then jihad. There's a distinction between Islamist Sharia and traditional Sharia, number one, and there's a distinction between jihad and jihadism. Jihadism is a new term, and it was not coined by President Bush, nor by his advisors. It was coined by the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. His name is Hassan al-Banna. This is the grandfather of Tariq Ramadan, who was touring in this country last month and also spoke here in Georgetown. He wrote a piece of 30 pages, and this piece made history. Risalat al-Jihad, essay on jihad, and he redefines jihad. And the jihad of Hassan al-Banna and jihad of Islamism is not the jihad of traditional Islam. It will take me a full hour to explain these terms to you, and I cannot do that because I have to stop in 3 minutes. Yeah? But keep in mind the new understanding of Sharia and the new understanding of jihad is not an Islamic revival. Therefore, the term revivalism is wrong. It is an invention of tradition. Maybe some of you know the very famous book of Hobsbawm, Eric Hobsbawm. There's an Eric Patterson, and there's also Eric Hobsbawm. Eric Hobsbawm wrote a very, very famous book, The Invention of Tradition. And the new understanding of Sharia and jihad are based on invention of tradition, and this invention of tradition is the outcome of politicized religions or religionized politics of Islamism. How can we deal with these issues? I have now 2.5 minutes, for the policy recommendation. I refer, the first, I'm going to refer to President Obama and praise him, but then, as a scholar, scholars do not restrict themselves to praise, but also they add to the praise criticism. And some people say in the criticism is stab, but stabbing is not the business of scholar. Criticism is a business of scholar. Obama is right when he spoke in last year in Ankara to the Turkish parliament, and he said the West is not at war of Islam. And the New York Times wrote at the time, Obama ends the clash of civilization. This is correct, and this is a good intention, and it was well received in the world of Islam that President Obama is ending the policy of Bush and introducing a peace with Islam to end the war of Islam. But President Obama did not mention the distinction between Islam and Islamism. Islam was never at war with the West, never, ever. Because how could a faith be at war with others? Yeah, it is Islamism. The issue is Islamism, and President Obama shied away or shunned from referring to the distinction. I don't know whether he knows it or not. I don't know. Yeah. But there could be two possibilities. One is he doesn't know it, or his advisors did not tell him that. Islam is not Islamism. Islam is a faith, and it is a faith of 1.6 to 7 billion people in the world, living as a majority in 57 countries, as a minority everywhere. And Islamism is a political ideology represented by Islamist movements, and it is a minority within Islam. It's a small minority, between 3, maximally 10%, but it is powerful because it has infrastructure, it has network, and it is most powerful. And it is very much engaged in the war of ideas, and most successfully. I read a book last month, it came out last month, by Paul Berman, The Flight of the Intellectuals, criticizing American intellectuals. And in page, I know that because I like the passage, page 285, he says, Islamist movement is thriving, and it has been successful also in the United States to impose its ways of thinking and how people are allowed or not allowed to think. Like if you do not think in line with them in the war of ideas, they accuse you of racism. They accuse you of Muslims. I am Asian Muslim. If you take a Senegalese Muslim, I lived in Senegal. I love Senegal. A Senegalese Muslim is dark skinned. There are, if you go to the Balkan, you will find Muslims who are blonde and blue-eyed. So how can we be a race? Yeah, there is no race called Muslims. Islam is a religious community. So the accusation of racism does not apply. Then you have the accusation of Islamophobia, and it is very important to distinguish between Islam and Islamism. And the present administration is not doing this, and therefore I think. The administration is not doing well. I mean, you see, I'm not involved in the controversy between Republicans and Democrats. Therefore, maybe it's wise to refer to a Democratic senator, Joe Lieberman, who published 2 or 3 days ago a commentary in Washington Post or Wall Street Journal criticizing President Obama for not referring for the difference between Islamists and Muslims. And this is a very important difference. In a war of ideas, we have to do that. I mean, everybody has to do that, especially non-Muslims like Eric and others. Say because we are not criticizing Islam, we are not antagonizing Islam, we are not doing injustice to the Islamic people. We are dealing in a war of ideas with Islamists because Islamists have a different concept for the order of the world than the West. And well, they have the right to have this view, but we can discuss it. But then you have to make the point clear. It is not about violence. Islamism, many people associate Islamism with violence. And therefore they say you have to dissociate Islam from violence, but Islam is not a religion of violence. And also Islamism is not about violence. Like, the Prime Minister of Turkey is an Islamist, but he's against violence. Yeah. Islamism is about political order and the order of the state, the order of the world, and also about the use of violence. It is possible to have dialogue between different communities in the world and to carry out the war of ideas. I mean, this may sound, and I end with this, may sound paradoxical, but it is not. Yeah, the war of ideas, competition about value systems, and this can be done peacefully in a dialogue between people of different concepts. And I think the book of Eric Patterson, and I end with this praise to you, and it is honest, giving you a credit, we have to maintain the term the war of ideas and look at it as a framework of dialogue and peaceful conflict resolution. And when talking about Islam, there are different Islams and different Islamisms. And in my chapter to the book of Eric, I argue there existed an Islamic tradition of humanism, and we need to revive this Islamic tradition of humanism to establish better ways for dealing with non-Muslims and in the pursuit of establishing a world order based on cultural pluralism. Not only Western views are right, there are other views, but to end the war of ideas, we have to establish a cross-cultural concept. Yeah? And the last reference, if you look, I made 2 references. First, the book of Eric, War of Ideas. Second, my own book, the Islam's Predicament with Modernity, chapter 5. And then the book of the German President Roman Herzog, Preventing the Clash of Civilizations. And I argue there, we need a cross-cultural international morality. Diversity is valuable, and diversity is there to stay. But if you have only diversity, people would fight. Diversity has to be combined with consent over basic values, and this cannot be imposed. It can only be reached in a dialogue between the civilizations. Thank you for listening to me.
Well, we have about 15 minutes to take some questions from the audience. So what I'd ask that you do is we have a roving mic, and it'll come to you in just a moment if you raise your hand. And would you stand so everyone can see you and hear what you have to say, and mention your affiliation, and then go ahead and ask your question to the professor. Ma'am.
Thank you for a good presentation. My name is Mervat Hatem. My affiliation is Howard University. And while I understand the emphasis that you put on the distinction between Islam and Islamism, especially for a Western audience, I was kind of puzzled by the fact that you did not really situate your discussion of this topic, given the fact that you're a student of international relations as well, in the rise of a globalized world in which there is not only increased contact and communication between different cultures, but in addition, new power relations. Certainly, I mean, one can argue that the clash of civilization thesis and the opposing thesis espoused by the United Nations about the dialogue among civilizations are attempts to try and figure out the culture of this new global world. And this is not the religion, the rise of religion or its attempt to claim politics isn't really the monopoly of Islam. It's happening with Christianity, it's happening with Judaism, and therefore this is really a global phenomenon. Islam has no monopoly in this particular space. Thank you.
Okay. I hope my excuse only the time, number one, and number two, the focus, yeah? So you addressed rightfully many issues, and they were not in my presentation because of the time and because of the focus. Number one, the politicization of religion is not an Islamic phenomenon. It exists in all religions. And there's in the late 80s, early 90s, the American Academy of Art and Sciences in Cambridge, and also Harvard Academy was involved, run a project about the fundamentalism project. Fundamentalism is every religion can be prone. Every religion can be prone to fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, and fundamentalism is a vision of remaking of the world. And we studied all world religions, and we were a group about 4 Muslims in a project doing the Muslim part. But this phenomenon, as you said, there's a globalization, and there's a global religious fundamentalism. So, I mean, this is one aspect. And second, when there are positive and negative dimensions of globalization, the positive one is the hybridization. Yeah. So people like when you travel. I spent my life traveling throughout the world, and I lived in 4 worlds. Yeah. In the introduction to the book, Islam's Predicament, Modernity, there's a chapter which is very personal between 4 worlds. The first world for me was the Arab world, the second world is Europe, the third world is the United States, and the fourth world is the non-Islamic part of the world of Islam, West Africa and Southeast Asia. And I said, ever since I left Damascus, I did not find a home. And so I was observing how do people live under conditions of globalization, and there's hybridization, and which is positive, but the negative aspect of it are the tensions, the cultural tensions that are occurring, and we have to address them, and we have to deal with them. I have a concept for what you have addressed, and it is in the book that you have the flyer. There's a chapter in this book, Islam Between Culture and Politics. I coined the formula, I say it slowly, the simultaneity of structural globalization and cultural fragmentation. My argument is globalization happens in structures: economy, politics, transportation, communication, but there is no global culture. Even in Islamic civilization, the culture differs. My culture is in Syria. Even in a close country like Egypt is different, even though it's close. But when I move from Egypt to Cairo, the differences are bigger. And when I move from Morocco to Senegal, they are even bigger. So you have diversity within one of the same culture, like in Islam. Yeah, and so there is no global culture. Culture is always local. And what happens with cultures that are exposed to globalization, to global structures, that you get more fragmentation. The more globalization, the more fragmentation, and the outcome is conflict. And this is actually a business to deal with as a business, for instance, for the Berkeley Center, yeah? As religion and world affairs. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. That was a really interesting talk. My name is Avi Shapiro. I'm a research assistant here at the Berkeley Center. I was curious about, you mentioned for a second that there's distinctions between different types of Islamism. But I'm curious what you think of some of the more moderate, because there's lots of political movements that are informed by religious perspectives. I mean, the Republican Party in this country is vast majority evangelical Christian. So like the Wasat Party in Egypt, where you have political parties that self-identify as Islamic, but also support pluralism. Do you see a place for a sort of hybridization of Islamic parties or Islamist parties that also embrace the types of pluralism that you're calling for, that the United Nations embraces?
Well, as much there's a diversity within Islam itself. I mean, Islam as not a faith, but as a cultural system. But even as a faith, you know, we all believe in Allah, we all believe in a prophet. But you see, when it comes to details, there are differences between Sunni and Shia, and even within Sunni Islam, between Malikis, Hanbalis, and Hanafis. But this existed all over throughout the history. So, but also, Islamism is not unique. Diversity in Islam is also diversity within Islamism. And I need 1 hour to outline this, but I do not have it. But you know, it's allowed in social science to refer to typologies, yeah? And so applying the methodological typology of Max Weber to the study of Islamism, I say there are two major trends in Islamism. Of course, there are more, yeah? But now I'm simplifying. You have jihadist Islamism and you have institutional Islamism. The difference between both want to remake the world. They agree on the goal, but not on the tactics, not on the methods. Jihadist Islamists believe that they can achieve their political vision only through jihad, which means violence. And their jihad, to be sure, I mean, it's very important, is not just jihad which is mentioned in the Quran. It's not jihad that was, jihad in traditional history of Islam was a regular war, not terrorism. So jihad as related to terrorism is not in the tradition of Islam, neither scripture nor history. It is novelty, yeah. And so that's why the term jihadism in Arabic jihadiyya, yeah. So jihadism is not jihad. So they are jihadist Islamists, and they are institutional Islamists. Institutional Islamists forswear jihadist action. They do not accept violence, like the Wasat Party you are referring to. Maybe a better example, the AKP in Turkey. Yeah, they are willing to go to the ballot box, and I like the combination, to abandon the bullet, and instead to be committed to the ballot box. Yeah, and so this distinction exists. Now, how to assess them? Even within, I call them institutional Islamists because they go to the institutions of democracy or non-democracy, because there are not so many democracies in the world of Islam, but they accept participating in institutions. But there are differences among them. Like you see, when Hamas came to power through election, 2006, and 2007 in June, about a year later on, they arrested all the people of Al-Fatah, 450 people, leader of the Fatah, and they're still in jail. They arrested members of the parliament who are not with them, and they had a kind of a coup in June 2007. This is not pluralism. Yeah? The AKP in Turkey didn't do that. Yeah, so they did not arrest their fools when they won the election. They won the election twice. But the AKP in Turkey, I have a problem with them because they are not willing to share power. When President Gül was proposed to be elected, the secular parties in Turkey said, "Let us share power. You have the office of the prime minister. This is Mr. Erdogan, and let us have the office of the president. So we share power." And they refused. Yeah, And what is happening in Turkey, I'm an expert in Turkey and I travel regularly to Turkey. I was also professor at Bilkent University in Ankara. They are hosting their detractors from institutions. When, for instance, when a position of a judge is vacant, they appoint an Islamist, and this is not pluralism. But I mean, I leave it open that Islamism, moderate Islamism or institutional Islamism, could be made compatible with democracy and pluralism, but the evidence is lacking. And here, the distinction between Islam and Islamism is very important, because in the United States, people refer to Islamic parties in Indonesia, and Indonesia is another Islamic home for me. I was the advisor of President Gus Dur, Abdul Rahman Wahid, when he was in office. God bless him, he passed away last December. I love him, yeah. He's a member of the Nahdlatul Ulama party. There are two basic parties in Indonesia, Nahdlatul Ulama and the Muhammadiyah. But both parties subscribe to pluralism and they practice pluralism. And they do not say, if you are against me, you are kafir, you are an infidel. They are real Democrats, but they are not Islamists. They are Islamic. Many people confused, say the Islamist parties in Indonesia provide evidence for the compatibility with democracy. But I say, yes, the evidence is correct, but these parties are not Islamist. They are Islamic parties. Okay.
Well, you may want to engage the professor at the end, but we want to be considerate of your time. And so please feel free in a few moments to stick around, have a little bit more to eat, talk to Bassam Tibi on a one-on-one basis. Please join me in thanking him for joining us today.
Maybe I finish with one with the information. I wrote a book about Islam and Islamism at Yale University, and I have a contract, yeah? And the book is supposed to be published this year, but there's a heated debate in the United States, and there's a pollution, intellectual pollution as well. And many people associate not only Islam but also Islamism with violence, and say you are entering here a mined area. Yeah, so I'm having problems, and some people recommended to me to read a book that just came out, published by Stanford University Press. It's an edited book with 16 contributions. The title of the book, Islamism, yeah? Edited by Richard Martin. And you find this war of ideas within the United States. There is not even a consent about the use of the term Islam or Islamism. And people do not talk to another in a Russian language. In a published version of the book, published by Stanford University Press, there are stone being hurled, accusation, strong words, and you see, actually, I hope the Berkeley Center is introducing civility, yeah, here, because we need to have civility in the debate. Like, we agree to disagree. Yeah, you see, there was a good example for that in Islam, in medieval Islam. In medieval Islam, you had 4 schools of law within Sunni Islam: the Malikis, the Hanafis, the Hanbalis, and the Hanafis. Yeah, and none of them accused the other of heresy, of infidelity. They talked to one another, and they had the culture of debate. Yeah, and I wish to have this culture of debate today in the world of Islam, because there's something evil in the world of Islam. I think, to me, it's more evil than terrorism. It is takfir. Takfir is to declare a person as kafir, as infidel, which legitimates you to kill the person. Yeah, and this is un-Islamic, and this is undemocratic as well. And so people have to learn disagreement, the culture of disagreement, to talk. And because we're talking about hot-button issues, the study of religion, of war affairs, is dangerous, because religion is a faith, and faith is not negotiable. Yeah. And one has to make 2 points clear, and I finish with this. Number one, when we talk about religion and world affairs, we are not talking about faith. Leave faith here in my heart. It is between me and God. Like, when I talk to Islamists, they say, how often you go to the mosque? Do you pray 5 times every day? I said, excuse me, you are intruding my privacy. This is between me and God, between me and Allah, what I do. And if I do wrong, Allah will punish me. But I can be punished if I violate the law in a democratic country. But the religious precepts relate to a person between me and God. And you have no authority to ask me such questions. So faith has to be individual and has to be protected. But we're talking here about the politicization of faith and not about faith itself. This is number one. It has to be established as a rule if we study religion and world affairs. And rule number two, civility. Yeah, that was, we have to deal with disagreement, not to call the person with whom you disagree names, but have respect. Say, I respect your view, but I do not share it. Thank you very much.